Welcome back to the XM Podcast. Here is your host, licensed mental health therapist, Matthew Knabe.
On the podcast today, we tackle the topic of sex, specifically men's sexual addiction. This is and has been a problem since the beginning of time, and still causing men and marriages distress. We have seen moral failures within the church, and we need to address this difficult topic. My guest is a wonderful therapist who is relatively new to Emerge Ministries, but someone I have found I've grown very fond of very quickly. He is leading our sex addiction group called Men at Arms Sigma Alpha. I'd like to introduce licensed independent social worker, Jerome Thompson.
As you know, my name is Jerome. I've been with Emerge for 2 years, actually, and prior to Emerge, I was with Blick Center, which is behavioral health, which actually got me started in behavioral health. And prior to that, I was with the Victim Assistance Program, and I worked as a domestic violence advocate as it relates to the court. So before there was Blick, being in the role of advocate, I didn't do much counseling, but I worked with the victim population. So these were people who experienced traumas, but I didn't get a chance to operate in the role of counseling. It was more so protect from the perpetrator and acting as a liaison between the victim and the prosecutor.
Jerome, tell me a little bit about your journey in mental health. Like, what was the path like? What got you into that interest, and what drove you to head in this direction?
Well, actually, I did not want to work in behavioral health, but I like most people, after they get hired, graduate school, you need a job.
True.
So I got hired at Blick, and I knew nothing about the mental health population, and I fell in love with it. And as I grew in working in the counseling role, which I guess all my life I've been a counselor, just that wasn't the term for it. They allowed for me to work with their men's group. And in their men's group, it was more so social skills and being able to social skills and coping skills and being able to convey how you feel with the situation that's at hand. And of course, being that the majority of the people that I worked with is men, comes the subject of sex and sexuality.
Which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today.
Yes, we are.
So through all that, talk to me a little bit about then your journey to Emerge. Well,
with Emerge, once again, I had got comfortable at the previous job. And I'm sure you've experienced working with people who you absolutely love working with. And I'm someone that does not like change. So I did not want to come to Emerge, honestly, but it's something when you ask God for something, like a change, and he gave me that change, and I'm so glad that it happened. And it was a fight to get to Emerge because I tried everything I could to stay with Blick. And then, of course, in working at Emerge, there was the experiencing a different kind of counseling. It's something when you can actually pray for a client, or you can actually say those things that's needed to be said without, of course you have to be ethical, but I can say, I will pray for you. that was huge and big for me. And then, of course, as time passed, there was an opportunity to join different groups here at Emerge.
Yeah. Well, I'm going on year 4. I'll be 4 years that I've been with Emerge in the fall, and you're coming in on 2. And I've just really enjoyed getting to know you the little bit that I've been able to. And I was able this week. I had a session this week, and I can say part of this without calling my client out. But I have a client that I referred to you, and I see the parents, and man, they are just so thrilled with the work that you're doing with their kid, and it was such a great thing. It was such a great marriage because, for me, I've been doing 100% telehealth this year, and you've been able to go into the office, which is great. And this client that I was seeing that I referred to you needed to see somebody in person. And the impact that you're making on this client's life is just incredible. And so I'm very thankful that you were able to overcome that fear of change and be able to come over into Emerge, because I think we're so blessed and grateful to have you.
No goodness of mine. That's one of those things. I am grateful for when God shows up in the middle of a session. Mm-hmm. And it's just been a blessed opportunity and working with every client, including the client that you referred, especially when they tell me things like, yes, I worked with Matt. My eyes light up. Oh, really? Oh, that guy is great.
Oh,
so well, it looks the same on my end.
Well, I appreciate that.
So God has been good to me. And for as much as clients get out of working with me, so do I.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So Jerome, I want to talk a little bit about, I'm trying to think now. This was probably a year and a half ago, maybe a little bit longer, that initially our leadership team had come to me and said, we really want to do a group for men, and we're interested in having you lead it. And it's going to be a men's sexual addiction group. And I was like all on board. I'm like, this is going to be great. And I started kind of doing the initial groundwork. And then leadership came back to me and said, but we also want you to do a podcast, and we want you to launch both of them very soon. And so I went back to them and said, I'm all about both of these things, but I can't have both of them on my plate and also do a full-time load of seeing clients. So then we started brainstorming, and you were relatively new at this point. You were probably with us for 6 months or so. And I was like, well, what about Jerome? And they were like, well, let's see if you would be interested. So I remember you and I had a conversation in the hallway, and I came up to you and I said, Jerome, this has been presented to me, but I don't know that I have the ability to do both of these things simultaneously, on top of the fact that at that point, I had no idea what a podcast was, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I had to do a lot of research in that regard. And I asked you, would you be open to maybe taking the idea of this Sigma Alpha or sexual addiction group that we wanted to start building again? Because I knew there was a history at Emerge where we had men's sexual addiction groups, but it had been a long time. So you, whether willingly or not, said that you were open to doing that. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what's the experience been like. So I kind of handed that baton off to you, and since then, over the last year and a half, what's the men's group been like?
In the word, great. I remember that day,
yeah,
and us talking about going with a men's sex group. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure I said that wrong for how it sounds, but a men's sexual addiction group.
That's right.
One of the things that I never really got a chance to say to you on that was, I guess we were on the same wavelength before, because I remember there had been talk of a men's sexual addiction group coming, and I was interested, and I really wanted to sit in. So when that happened, would I be willing to run with it and then terror at the same time? Mm-hmm. And the reason why I was excited was, wow, this is what I like to do. I remember doing this with Blick, but then it dawned on me, this is a totally different type of group, being that, we're dealing with the painful aspect of it.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure that I could meet, or we could meet the men where they were in their individual journeys. And I am a creature that needs structure, and I did not have that. And I guess that was the big challenge, because it was like, oh, what do I do?
Yeah.
So that's where the journey began for me.
So, Jerome, tell me a little bit about men's sexual addiction. We've got people who are listening, and I think a little bit of background and education on some of the things that you're noticing with the men that you've been working with. And if we can kind of, start a conversation. I mean, we're not going to fix all of the stuff in this podcast, but maybe at least starting a conversation, and maybe a guy that might be struggling right now, who's listening to this and going, oh, I wasn't even aware that this might be a problem in my life. What are some things that you're noticing?
Well, you use the term sexual addiction. That right there is a conundrum for me, simply for the fact sex is a drive, as we have learned in many different courses. Either if it is a sociological course or if it's a ministerial course, sex is a drive. Mm-hmm. And just going back to the whole Genesis thing, be fruitful and multiply. Mm-hmm. However, in the same token, with addiction, the chemical altering that happens within the individual mentally, the chemical altering mentally that an individual goes through. Now, if you tie it to a drive, it becomes very scary, because there's shame and guilt that comes behind an addiction. And that's where most men struggle, is with the shame and guilt. We all know that sex is made for procreation, and it's the highest form of physical love that we can express for one another. Mm-hmm. With that being said, there must be balance.
Yes.
And in today's culture, we live in a culture of excess. Mm-hmm. Or it can be said that we live in a culture of excess. And too much of a good thing can be a bad thing, especially if you have no balance. So one of the biggest things with men's group is just teaching them balance and educating the difference between sexual drive and sexual addiction. If you can understand where you need to balance, it helps you overcome an addiction of this type.
Yeah. So what would be some of the signs, Jerome, that it's moved from a drive to addiction?
One of the biggest signs that it's become an addiction, or it's moved from a drive to an addiction, is when you tend to not meet daily obligations or serious obligations because of this habit or this chemical altering that's taking place in your mind. That's when you realize it's become an addiction, when it's outside the parameters of being intimate with your significant other, and now it is, I need it, I gotta have it in order to function.
Yeah, I think I've noticed with, I think you and I both, I work with a lot of male clients, and a majority of them come with some type of sexual or pornography addiction. And that's a high population of people I work with. And I notice when you have to go into secrecy for your sexual interests, that to me is a red line of you're probably moving from drive into addiction. Like, I think a big part of sexuality that between you and your spouse, if there is a secret part of that, that to me is telling that we are not being open, we're not being honest, we're not being even truthful with ourselves. And I think a lot of that secrecy is kind of like where you were just talking about. When sexuality moves into a place of shame, we've got a question going, is this of God then? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. One of the things that I've noticed about when we talk about porn addiction, the biggest thing that it does is isolate. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, but I can't do anything by myself. Mm-hmm. We like to esteem ourselves on our abilities, especially we as men. You know, the more you can accomplish, the more you can do by yourself, it makes you stand out as a man, or that is the belief that we have.
Yeah.
However, with an addiction, you cannot overcome it by yourself. And that's the biggest piece of any sex addiction group is the support. I like willpower, and willpower is great, but it only gets you so far. And by so far, I mean about 5 minutes.
Not far at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And, you know, one of the things that you had just mentioned, when we talk about sex, we talk about sex in the confines of how God created it. It's an intimacy. And intimacy is being shared between two people. A pornography addiction is a one way. It's a voyeuristic look at something that is not really intimacy at all. It's a very different thing. And so even with that, I mean, that's oftentimes where I kind of start the conversation with clients that I have that are struggling with pornography, because there's not much of an intimacy at all that happens. There's in fact, it's not intimate at all. It's very objectifying. So Jerome, I want to talk about, you're about to launch a new group. Talk to me about when does that start up? And then two, a little bit about how you're approaching this men's group coming up.
Our upcoming men's group will start April the 5th, which is Monday, and it will start 6:30 p.m. and end at 8 p.m. So that is about an hour and a half. That hour and a half goes super fast because there is so much material as well as so many emotions to cover. One of the things you talked about was intimacy. And that's something huge for us in the group, because we generally find that most of us as men aren't formally taught about intimacy. I remember I really didn't know anything about intimacy until I got married, or after I got married. And it was a learn as you go. So you can just imagine how well I got it right. As it relates for men's group, we generally meet for about 8 weeks. So 8 weeks for an hour and a half, once a week. And with this men's group now, there's more. We didn't have a workbook, but now we have, I don't want to sound like a teacher, but we have worksheets and various assessment tools that we want to utilize in men's group. And the reason why we have these things is because at the heart of any therapy, there's measurement. And that's what the tools are used for. They allow for the individual to measure where they're at, or take an assessment of where they are, and possibly, find root causes or the negative core beliefs, because that's the goal, finding the negative core beliefs behind what got you to using porn, because porn really isn't the problem. Porn is a symptom. And with these 8 weeks, each of the courses follow a theme. They touch on 3 different aspects. That is the physiological aspect of it, That's examining sex as a drive and how it affects you as an individual, sex and the mental and social aspects. How do you communicate your thoughts and feelings, that learning that intimacy and expressing it to your partner, whatnot, even amongst your family. And of course, there's the spiritual aspect. How does this impact my relationship with God?
Yeah. So, Jerome, if somebody's listening right now, let's just say there's a guy out there that has been dealing with this for a while and is ready in that contemplative state of change that is like, I need to do something about this. What would they need to do to be able by April 5th to be a part of this group if they felt like my heart is being tugged in this direction?
First of all, I am thankful for the ladies at registration. They would go to the Emerge website and get in contact with registration and inquire about the Brothers in Arms Sigma Alpha program, because that's what it's titled.
Yep, love that.
And we did that in homage to you.
I appreciate
because that was your title. So we wanted to make sure that we incorporated that.
Well, I appreciate it. And so we can discuss this really quick. When I was starting the group, we were having a tough time getting it off the ground because guys don't want to come into a building and check in necessarily for a sex addiction group. And that everybody in the waiting room is like, "Oh, hi, I'm Tim. I'm here for the sexual addiction group." So what I did, because I realized I was hitting a wall when I would get guys to go, yeah, I'm interested in doing a group, but I don't want to go publicly and I don't want people. So I ended up taking the Greek alphabet and taking Sigma Alpha, kind of like a fraternity of men who are getting together. And therefore, if they're checking in or if they're saying, "Hey, where am I? I'm going to my Sigma Alpha group tonight." So you don't have to self-disclose if you don't want to, So I think that I appreciate you sticking with that, but I love that Brothers in Arms Sigma Alpha. It's kind of like a chapter of, guys coming together and being able to talk about this topic that it's crazy hard to talk about. It's not like anybody wants to go, "You know what I want to do this evening? I'm going to go sit down with a bunch of guys and talk about my addictions to pornography or my addictions to sexuality or whatever it may be." It's super hard.
It is, in how it sounds. But what I have found in the group is if you just make it to the door, and once you meet the guys and we get to talking, you find that you're not the only one that has been struggling with this. And that goes back to the overall goal of the group, is to free men from the shame and guilt.
Love it.
And then to see that you have that support behind you, that's empowering. There's a lot of therapeutic terms and concepts that we as clinicians know, and we explain those to our clients. But to have the men take this idea of Brothers in Arms in correlation with sexual addiction, and they share it from one another, that's empowering. I find that the men are just as good of facilitators as we as clinicians are.
Yeah. That's so good.
Of course, I have to watch it as well.
I think that's so good, Jerome. I think the thing that you're saying is, when we get off of the island in our minds that we're the only ones experiencing or dealing with this, and we're able to kind of bring it to the table and expose ourselves to the point of going, this is where I'm wounded, and this is where I'm hurt, and this is where I'm scarred, and these are the behaviors that have happened because of the wounding and the scarring. And then all of a sudden, a guy catty corner to you sitting over there says, "No way, me too." All of a sudden we've connected. And in that moment of connection, it's like we can start to heal, because I believe that's how God created us, is to be in community with each other. And we experience life together. And the more and more we hide, and the more and more we keep our stuff in the closet, the more and more we're going to be sick. And we're going to just continue to be sick until we come to the table and say, "Hey, here's my stuff."
Amen. That couldn't have been said any better.
Thank you.
One of the other things that we also wanted to incorporate this time around was something for the spouses and significant others, because they too are hurting as a result of this. And the goal of that is to inform them, hey, we don't do this because of you or because you are lacking something. This has been a wound that was here long before you, and I didn't know how to cope with it.
Yeah, so good. So April 5th is the first group. It's going to go for 8 weeks. Let's just say somebody doesn't have time, or maybe they got a vacation up. Will there be another group after this session of 8 weeks?
Absolutely. The goal now, since we have like a structure to follow, because the first men's group were great because it allowed for me to see what the men needed, as well as to teach various things. And as they were able to inform us of what they needed, we were able to incorporate that into a program. But now, after these 8 weeks pass, it is my hope and my intention to start to have maybe 2-week breaks and then pick up again.
Nice.
So that the program can continue to move. And we are looking to develop a phase 2, which is more so the support piece, because that's a major piece in recovery, and it allows for the men to check in. Because it's one thing to learn and utilize this new thing in your life, but from time to time you need a tune-up or you need a check-in. So we want to make sure that we provide that support for them for as long as we can.
That's awesome. I love that. And I think it's great that, there's going to be like maybe a 2-week break, and then the system's back on and we're back up and running. So that'll be a good thing for just the community to know that this is another resource that Emerge is providing, that I think is extremely important in our day and age and what's going on in people's lives. Jerome, anything else you feel like we need to make sure we cover in our time together? Is there anything else you want people to know about the men's group?
The biggest thing we want you to know is that it's about fellowship, and it's that whole, and I can't remember the Emerge motto, rest and be free.
Yeah. Find rest and live free.
Absolutely. That's what we're looking for. And this is what we want to impart. We don't want to do anything super extreme because this is already an uncomfortable thing, but we also want you to feel like you're coming home.
Well, I want to encourage people, and I think you said it earlier, and I want to repeat it. If you just get in the room, if we can just get them through, I know the anxiety I've talked about with clients, like pulling up to Emerge for your first intake session. I mean, sometimes it's like climbing a mountain just to get out of the car and get into the clinician's office. But if you can get yourself in the room, it's amazing what God might be doing in your life in this particular area, which I think is awesome. Well, Jerome, I appreciate you so much, and I'm just really honored to be a fellow worker with you, and love that you were able to overcome that feeling of not liking change, and so glad that you've come to Emerge and you're part of our team. And I just appreciate you very much. Thanks so much for being part of the program.
And likewise, thank you, my friend.
If this podcast is pulling on you and you feel the conviction, call Emerge now and get into Jerome's group. Don't waste any time. If you are near or around the Akron area, call 800-621-5207 today or go to emerge.org for more information. Thank you, Jerome, for your heart and what you do. You know, this past week I was at church, and a lady who I probably will never know who this exactly was because we were both wearing masks, asked if I was the host of the XM podcast. She said, "Keep it up. It's greatly appreciated." That was very kind and encouraging. Really, really appreciate that feedback. Please share this podcast with friends and family. Give us a comment. If you like what we do, give us a like. Well, my friends, I hope this has found you well. So until next time, or when our Savior comes. God bless.